So I've been reading here. So if you've been coming to these, you might have heard my stories. So I completed a manuscript, and it's about a little girl that grows up during the 1930s, during the Great Depression, and she comes to age during the World War II years. And so the section I'm going to read you right now is, the family was living in this little town, but their landlord, they lost their rent, their lease or something, so they had to go live with their grandma in South Dakota. Now this section is when they're coming back to their little town. After the family settled into the house, Russell hung a cork bulletin board in the parlor. Amateur radio operators proudly displayed postcards they had received. Russell stuck pins in them and hung them on the board. To use amateur radio, one needed to have a license and proficiency in Morse code, which he had due to his training in the Army's Signal Corps. Working as a telegrapher at the train depot kept his skills sharp. In the beginning, amateur radio operators communicated with Morse code, a series of high-pitched beeps. Each letter of the alphabet has a particular beep or number of beeps. These sounds are called dots and dashes, or as radio operators would say, dits and daws. Whenever he talked to somebody, he'd get their address, mail them a card, and that person would mail him a card. Most ham operators printed a postcard with their call letters. Russell's call numbers were W9TJP. And just as a little aside, Russell is my grandpa. And when I was in the middle of writing this book, I looked up those call letters, and it was still assigned to him. And he had been dead for many years. But I just looked it up this week, and somebody else has his call letters now. Okay. Later in the mid-1930s, ham operators started using microphones and their voices. The family followed his hobby with interest. Winifred, Russell, and the children happily mingled in the old neighborhood in their new home. Both adults and children got along well. Winifred enjoyed visiting other mothers for coffee time. Russell mixed with the men. Winifred suffered from low hemoglobin, also known as anemia, a disease in which your body doesn't have enough red blood cells and you constantly feel tired. At night, Winifred had a sense of satisfaction and relief as she relaxed from the day and fell asleep. She was grateful for everything she had. She thought about the events she and Russell had experienced in the past 10 years. Moving from Mitchell to Avoca when Russell's railroad position was eliminated, losing bank account money, losing their rented home, the children's healthy births. Some of her neighbors lived on $30 a month from government relief programs. Russell earned $125 a month. Each night she said a prayer thanking God for a husband who helped with household chores as well as child-rearing chores. He was a good provider and a gentle helper. Children from the north side of the town would gather in the empty lots to play games between the Meinhardt house and the Hansen house. Boys and girls played softball, capture the flag, pump, pump, pull away, run, sheep, run, crack the whip, kick the can, Captain May I, prisoner's base, tug of war, blind man's bluff, work up softball, tackle football, and ante-over. The children jumped rope often but never got into fancy jumping. Hopscotch was always fun. Jeanette's shoes stepped on the concrete sidewalk. Big trees framed the sidewalk on either end of the stretch in front of her house. Every 2.5 feet was a line where the sidewalk joined together. The sidewalk was clear, but sometimes the grass began to creep over the sidewalk. Russell tore it back. Weeds rarely grew in the cracks because the kids often walked back and forth on it. Also, they rode bikes, pushed doll strollers, and generally just played on the sidewalk. Don't step on a crack or you'll break your mother's back. Hi, Margie, want to play jacks with me? 6-year-old Jeanette said. I got a new set for my birthday. Dressed in bib overalls, her dark brown hair was pulled back into braided pigtails. Sure, 9-year-old Margie said, her short blonde hair parted to the side. Margie walked across the grass and sat down beside the sidewalk. Jeanette squatted on the sidewalk and threw jacks down. She bounced a red ball with her little chubby hands, scooped up some jacks. The tall trees cast a shadow over the cement sidewalk. The two continued to play as Jeanette's 3-year-old brother, George, made the sputtering noise of a truck. As August wore on, the family built a backyard smudge pot to ward off mosquitoes in the evenings. They would sit and talk. Sometimes neighbors joined them. As the sky turned dark, an owl began to hoot. Often at least one owl was heard, but many times another owl hooted back. The children took it as a sound of nature. It was natural and expected. Some people are afraid of the sound of an owl. Jeanette and her family could hear the hoots after they went to bed. As Jeanette lay in bed, falling asleep, listening to hoot owls, she thought about starting school and learning how to read. Any more time, or is that it?
You can finish.
Well, okay, so now the next section is called Jeanette Goes to School. On Jeanette's first day of school in September 1936, she walked the 4 blocks with her 2 older brothers and her sister Helen to the brick 2-story school built in 1894. Both Helen and Jeanette wore new cotton dresses that their mother had sewn. The night before, their mother ironed the dress, made sure the girls had slips to wear underneath them, and hung them in a small closet in the bedroom. Jeanette's dress was blue and Helen's was green. Each girl wore anklet socks and leather Mary Jane shoes. How will I know where to sit? Jeanette asked her sister, who was a year ahead. Don't worry, Helen said. The teacher will show you, and I'll be there in the same room as you all day. What if I have to go to the bathroom? Jeanette asked. You can go during recess and lunch, or just raise your hand and let the teacher know, Helen said. And if you didn't already know, the teachers call them lavatories. The school had been updated with flush toilets in the basement. There were 2 stalls in the girls' lavatory and 1 sink to wash hands. The floor was concrete. The first time Jeanette used the toilet, she was startled when she got off the stool and the toilet flushed itself. She wished Helen would have warned her. After that, she didn't much trust those toilets and always got in and out of the bathroom as fast as possible. 1st and 2nd graders sat in the same room. 3rd and 4th graders were in the same room. 5th and 6th shared the same room. The highest grade in the school was 8th grade, and in the same room as the 7th graders. In the 1st grade, Jeanette often listened to the 2nd graders' lessons, and she continued listening to the grade ahead of her all during grade school. Teachers knew her older siblings to be well behaved and get good grades, and they expected the same from Jeanette. Jeanette was both excited and frustrated with school. Before she attended school, everyone pronounced her name by listening to her family to say it, Jeanette. Few people had ever seen her name spelled. On her birth certificate, it was spelled Janet. Russell liked short names. He and Winifred looked in the dictionary and saw that her name could be spelled Janet and pronounced Jeanette. The spelling did not cause a problem until her first day of school. During Roll call, the teacher called out each student's name. When the teacher called her name, she pronounced it Janet. After everyone's name had been called, Jeanette quietly and nervously walked up to Miss March's wooden desk in the front of the class. Miss March had short cropped black hair and wore a V-neck wrapped cotton dress with a floral print and belt. "Yes, Janet?" Miss March asked. "Miss March," the bashful girl said as she looked first at the teacher's face and then down at the floor. "My name is pronounced Jeanette." At the beginning of each school year, she worked up the courage to walk up to the new teacher and explain. Not an easy thing for a bashful girl to do. As time wore on, Jeanette loathed the mispronunciation of her name. When she was in 8th grade, her mother wrote to the South Dakota Health Department and had the spelling of the name changed to Janette so there wouldn't be as much confusion.